What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 2 live stream for the Valspar Championship. Gonna break down what to do out there for your round 2 lineups, both on the weather perspective, strategy, ownership heading into Friday, as well as any questions that you guys have down in chat. We'll go through a little bit of the contest selection that we've got out there for Friday, as well as what you should be thinking about when putting your lineups together. But whatever you guys want to go ahead and fill in those gaps, go ahead and let me know down below. Let's go ahead and hop on into what we've got over there for tomorrow. So first things first, to start with the weather out there for Friday, where I think it looks pretty much like it did out there yesterday. It looks like the early conditions are going to be a little bit windier as what we have in the afternoon. Now, it does look like the sustained winds, at least very early on, might be a hair lower than what we have for the rest of the day. But by the time we get to like 9, 10 a.m., those sustained winds are getting closer to 13 to 15 miles an hour, and your wind gusts are going to be high during that stretch. So it's kind of hard to really get a picture on whether it's going to be calmer or really blustery to go out there and start the day. But the other aspect that I think makes it maybe slightly advantageous to have a later tee time tomorrow would be those temperatures in the morning. It starts right about 47 degrees Fahrenheit, which is going to be a lot cooler than what you had for today. And when you have those gusty conditions and those cooler temperatures, it makes for an extremely long golf course. So we'll have to see if this forecast changes any throughout the night. But as of right now, what we're seeing right here, I would prefer my guys starting towards the second half, but that doesn't mean you have to fully stack that side. Just to remind you guys with how crazy this weather can be, right? Just about everyone out there, right, expected the PM to play harder today, and it did for, let's say, the first 50, maybe 60% of the PM wave, but that storm came through, the winds died down, and it went from playing at like 1.8, 1.9 strokes over par to see around 1.4 over par right here. So the weather can be extremely chaotic, especially down here in this state. But as of right now, if you're going to break ties, if you're going to try and find some of your scrubs down towards the bottom end of the board, and maybe you just got to take 1 or 2 more players in your player pool, you know, maybe a shade towards that side of tee times. But if you got some studs towards the top end of the board that are going off early, I don't necessarily think you have to cross them out. Now, if you're trying to choose between 2 players and they are pretty much equal across the board, and you know one is going off when it's going to be a little bit warmer, when those sustained winds and the wind gusts are supposed to get a little bit calmer, like, you know, give me the guy going off later for sure, but it doesn't have to be your entire process for tomorrow. So just the FYI over there on the weather. And in terms of how it's going to impact the main slate, it's going to, I would say, more than nullify what you had over here for round number 1. So if there's going to be an edge, I'd probably expect it to be around a half a shot edge. But like I mentioned with your player pool, it doesn't mean you have to go 100% towards that side. So I personally haven't made my player pool yet. I'm going to have to go through the shots gained metrics, you know, see where a lot of the good ball striking poppers are really showing up. If there's a fair amount of them going off there in the morning wave, then, you know, I'm still going to be incorporating a few of those guys into lineups. So that's it from the weather perspective. Let's move over to tee times, which, you know, because it's round 2, nothing real special is going on, right? It's the same setup as you're going to have for round number 1. First tee time's going off at about 7:30 local time, and you know the beginning of the second wave is going to be at, I believe, like a 12:45 would be the first tee time there for the PM. So you know nothing changing out there from round number 1. Now the next thing I like to do is to go through some of the shots gained metrics, and I know we had a question down in chat about Webb Simpson, so I'll go ahead and bring that up before we do the full deep dive. So any specific players you guys want me to go through, I'll feel free to go ahead and do so. But here's Webb Simpson today. He gained off the tee and around the green on brand for Webb Simpson, but he lost on approach and with the putter. So hopefully that answers your question, Todd. I know you couldn't catch the live stream out here while we were live, but you can watch that after the fact and get that. We had Goku showing up on time for once. Love to see it. Welcome on in, buddy. We have Ross down there. Yeah, Thagala going bogey to end was very much so on brand. What's going on, Alan? Welcome on in. We got Corey down there on time as well. Look at that. We got Goku, Corey on time today. People that are on top of it, you love to see it. And I appreciate you, Alan, with the kind words there. The weather is looking spicy in the AM tomorrow. Would I consider playing some of the AM? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but yeah, I'd consider some guys on both sides, but the PM looks like the harder side, or the easier side, I should say. we were always playing AM, PM wave for Friday. Exactly. And that is the point, Nick. No one expected what happened today, right? Even if you ended up playing it closer to even, which shout out to DGen for saying that, was obviously very sharp with what he said out there with that. You didn't think today was going to play easier on that side, right? So obviously crazy stuff happens with the weather, but yeah, today was the bigger edge. Yeah, I wasn't first earlier. I'm still having a good week, by the way, Jay, but not in first, which honestly, after day one, I don't really want to be in first place. I don't want to deal with all those nerves. So we're close to the top, but not in first. I'll take it. What's going on, Michael? The big question is, will they finish tonight? Absolutely not. There's no chance. They're never going to play an event with 156 players again after 2025. Heck, I think even after the beginning of this year, they don't have any scheduled for 156 players. They physically can't get that many in. It's not even feasible the longest days of the year. Check on Damon for sure. I'll do that for you. So good old Joel Damon was a gainer off the tee, and he lost in the other three categories, but he wasn't terrible on approach and around the green. So, the big negative, the reason why he shot +3, or at least through 17 holes was +3, was the fact that he was losing 2 strokes putting. So this might be a little bit outdated, as I'm sure he finished his round by the time this was on there. But yeah, it was the big putter for him today. Do I think the weather is going to be a factor for tomorrow since the weather cleared up? Yeah, I mean, if we can look at some of these models on here, Jay, but these were updated as of 24 minutes ago. So you can see this is the HRRR that we have here. GFS is another one that I like to look at as well. They all kind of look the same, but they looked the same today, right? And then it ended up flipping. So that's why I give you guys that disclaimer, right? These are forecasts, right? These aren't the gospel. They're not the absolute truth for what's going to happen tomorrow. And the weathermen get stuff wrong all the time. So, to act like it's always going to be correct would be foolish, right? I think that was the idea with a lot of people that didn't fully stack this week, is that the weathermen get things wrong quite a bit. And if today you took that kind of stand, well, you ended up being absolutely correct. So yeah, for sure, it could happen that way, but that's not the way that the weather forecasts look. So I'm going to treat it as it's more accurate. And hey, they get things right more than they're wrong, but they do get things wrong sometimes. That's for damn sure. How about that Kazire punt? Yeah, I saw that. The guy's in the wrong sport. He hit it like 40 yards in the air. That was absolutely crazy. We got Nicky says he played it 4-2 for week long. Yeah, I had a lot of those as well. Heck, I even had a few 3-3s. So I would personally prefer if that side played easier, because I have more guys on the AM PM side, but I have Thagala in the pool. I have guys like, was it Lowry in the pool that had a decent performance this afternoon, but also JT that shot like +2 or something like that. Also Jordan Spieth, right? That shot like +2. So it no matter which side you played, you had to play guys that played well. That's for sure. It was like 0.15 shots easier. 144 is a max field. I agree with that, but it's 156 this week, so they got to fix that rule. I think 132 is a better number, and if we're getting really strict about it, it should go to 120 so that they can finish with extra time in case there's a delay. Like, let's say there's a fog delay, something like that. You want to have a little bit of leeway to work with. So I'd go down to 120 if it was my choice. Lucas Glover, of course, who, by the way, he played a really good last 9. So a lot of these shots gain metrics that we're going to see on here are positive from his last 5 or 6 holes. So he gained a bunch around the green and then was kind of okay in the other 3 categories. I've got to admit, not my favorite stat profile that I've ever seen. So yeah, good old Lucas Glover. I'd say he fits this course to a T. Very accurate driver, good mid to long iron player, but the stat profile today wasn't necessarily like a massive bright spot, right? We prefer our players to be gaining a majority of their shots gained with the off the tee on approach. And in a second, when we go through the leaderboard from today, right, that's what we're going to be looking for in players, right? Guys that more so did it with how they actually hit the ball. Did Burns find his irons? So Burns early was making a whole bunch of putts, but let's see what it looked like overall. Not really, right? He slightly gained over there with his irons today. Like I kind of suspected, it was more so the putter that carried him for his round today. So I don't know if I'd say that, but hey, at least he was into the positive, right? Thorbjorn Olesen deep dive, if I could be so kind, of course. And I'm going to do it. You don't got to beg like that. Come on now. Thorbjorn Olesen, by the way, one of my favorite Danish players we have out there. He gained to the 2 ball striking category. So unlike a lot of the other players that we've brought up here, right, this is the kind of stat profile that we're looking for. It's a lot more sustainable when it's done with the actual ball striking metrics, and short game left a little bit to be desired. So, hey, maybe a little bit of a bounce back candidate. Is that why Kazire withdrew? Yeah, probably, man. He was pissed. And by the way, he bent his putter. I don't think it fully broke, or at least it didn't look like it did over there in the video. But yeah, he was using a wedge to putt for a hole or two, and then he withdrew. So I would imagine so. 155 after Paul Waring withdrew. Yeah, and then his replacement, actually, Bronson Burgoon, withdrew Ross. So it was down to 154, actually, at the beginning of the event. Spieth is a damn madman, so much fun to watch. Yeah, he's an experience, that's for sure. And you're looking for sleeper golfers. I'm not going to give you any in particular, Jay, but I'll give you a bunch of candidates when we go through the shots gained metrics. You can pick your favorites out there on either side. And then you said thoughts on Justin Thomas. And yeah, by the way, I'm assuming you're talking about Jordan Spieth when you're talking about the boomerang. Yeah, he's or maybe the putter out there with Kazire. Either way, if you're talking about the Kazire one, it did look like a boomerang. If you're talking about Jordan Spieth and his bounce back, I could see that too. But let's go through Justin Thomas before we go through these shots gained metrics. So Justin Thomas, he had a really good last 9 as well, right? He was like +4 through his first 9, and then ended up shooting -2, I believe, his last 8 holes. And he was kind of decent across the board, right? He lost off the tee, was positive both on approach and then around the green. The putter could have been a little bit better, but we always say that about Justin Thomas, right? He usually has a lot of trouble getting the ball in the hole. And it's not necessarily like he's a massive candidate to go out there and gain a whole bunch of strokes putting tomorrow, but this isn't a terrible stat profile, right? Like, he was at least okay over there on approach. The around the green play being into the positive a stroke is kind of a little bit of a red flag, but I would say that he's one of those AM wave players that I would not shy away from playing, right? Like, even if I think the PM plays like a half stroke easier, and that's honestly about what I expect over there for tomorrow. Guys like Justin Thomas could easily make up half a stroke, right? That's one good hole for Justin Thomas. He can gain a half a stroke to the field over there at hole number 1. He goes out there, makes a birdie on that par 5, right? That's a half a stroke right there, right? He does that, and then he just has a decent round in, right? That's him easily being it's not even that hard to see that from somebody like a Justin Thomas. So don't feel like it's impossible for those guys to get there. So speaking of, let's go through the shots gained metric. So I'm going to refresh this so that everything is updated after the play that's been finished. A few guys obviously still finishing up their round, so those aren't going to be completely accounted for. But what we're going to look for here are guys that with the 2 ball striking categories, that would be off the tee and on approach, are gaining to the field. And the reason why, we already stated a few times, these are the kind of guys I could see actually doing it again tomorrow. So Ryan Fox, for example, he gained 5 strokes approach today. That is ridiculous. Keith Mitchell, he did it across both categories. 1.5 off the tee, about 2.5 over there with the irons. Kevin Yu, same thing, was into the positive out there in both categories. These sort of players, you throw in a Nick Hardy, he was a PM wave guy. John Pock was an early starter. Kevin Velo, one of those later players that hasn't even finished his round quite yet. These are the sort of players that are towards the top end of my short list. Now, if they're highly owned, I'm probably not going to get to them. So, a Kevin Velo, a John Pock that for main slate were essentially unowned. Now they might be like 1-2% because of their round 1 performance. I'm probably not playing those sort of guys, right? Like a Kevin Velo, a John Pack, that's probably their ceiling round. Them going out there and gaining like 2-3 shots gained to ball striking. But somebody like a Keith Mitchell or especially a Will Zalatoris, I'd say he probably sets up the best out of all these players that I see here because he lost a bunch of strokes putting today. Obviously, solid out there with the ball striking. That's why he's towards the top end of this list. But he's T41, and he's not going to be chalky. Like, that kind of just decent day, not great day out there in round number 1 isn't going to draw a whole bunch of attention because what we got to remember over there for DFS, we'll talk through some contests here in a minute, and then we're going through our lineup construction, is that a lot of the ownership and a lot of other people that we're playing against are going to be focusing on your Keith Mitchells up here, your Ryan Foxes, your, other guys starting up there towards the top 10. So that might be a Sahith Theegala, a Justin Lauer, Luke List that are all up there, the top 10 starting. Not so much your T41 players, not so much your guys down here at like T80 that could be a little bit more of sleeper plays and lower owned. So that's why I'm looking towards the top end of this ball striking list, not just to find conviction plays, but also to try and find some diamonds in the rough. if you just want to look at approach by itself, I think that's another way to go out there and find some poppers, because there could be some guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes off the tee. And a lot of times when you're losing a bunch off the tee, right, it's because you hit water balls, that sort of thing. So like a Davis Riley here, right, he gained 3 strokes over their approach, but he lost 2.5 off the tee. Like, he's going to have to clean that up for sure to go out there and keep like a bogey-free round, for example. But, him going out there and gaining a bunch off the tee, on approach and over there with the putting is kind of spot in line with when he plays well, right? He's one of the best iron players when he's out there and he's hot in that category, and he can really fill it up over here on these overseeded greens. A few other guys that kind of stand out here would be like a Valimaki. He didn't do that much off the tee, but he was pretty solid over there with his irons. Quade Cummins, he's an extremely tall and long player. Off the tee, hits the ball a long way. So kind of surprising that he was losing off the tee. You can see he hasn't finished his round quite yet, but he's well into the positive over there with the irons. These are the sort of players that if I can get at low ownership, and I haven't ran my projections quite yet over there for my Patreon and slate, but if I'm getting sub 5% on like a Quade Cummins, who you would expect that, right? He's going to be, I think, top end of the 6K range player out there for your round 2 showdown. Like those sort of guys, I mean, hell, you might even be like sub 3% owned over there in GBPs. You give me that kind of ownership on a ball striking popper, then I'm going to be all ears. But if there are Ryan Fox, for example, who's up there at -3, who I could see, especially because he's a 7K range guy, right, as opposed to the 6K down there with the Cummins, like I could see Ryan Fox in my projections being closer to like 7, even 10% owned out there in my projections. And, those sort of players, it's not impossible to go out there and use them. It's just you're going to have less leverage against the field using those sort of players, and they're not going to give you as different to the field. Like you're going to have a higher chance of duplicating when you have those sort of players in lineups. I'd just rather go a little bit further down this list, right? Some of the guys that are towards the top here, that's why they're at the top end of the leaderboard, those top end ball strikers. Still just try and find some solid ball strikers, maybe not the best that you have in the field, and that could be a really good way to go out there and use this to your advantage. I also like to look at some of the guys that gained a bunch with their short game, because a lot of those players got a little bit lucky. So, for example, a Jacob Bridgman gained nearly 6 strokes putting. A Ricky Castillo also gained over 4 strokes over there with the putter. Same thing with guys like Valimaki, nearly 4 strokes there, and Echeverria gained 3 strokes in that category. Billy Horschel, Keith Mitchell there, Joseph Bramlett, Davis Riley. A lot of these players, I wouldn't count on it happening again. So, a Riley, though it was a positive, right, him going out there and gaining a whole bunch on approach, I wouldn't be counting on those 2 shots gained with the putter again. So a lot of these players, you've got to get, give a little bit of a down tick out there with their projection, especially if they're going to be chalky. And with guys like a Bridgman and Castillo, right, they're going to be a lot more popular now that they had that -4 performance. Even guys like a Valimaki, a Goodwin, and Echeverria there at -3, they're going to be a lot more popular than what they were for main slate. If you guys saw my live stream yesterday, right, I mentioned Echeverria as a value play, a little bit of a diamond in the rough that you could get to, right? He was like 2.5, 3% owned out there in contests this week, if not even lower than that out there in a lot of cases. Tomorrow, he might be in that 7 to 10% range like you have with some of those other players up top. They're just not nearly as good of plays when they're double 3 times the ownership out there in this single round sample. So that's why you want to kind of fade the top end of the board a bit. That's usually a pretty sound strategy over there in Showdown. And a lot of these guys that did it with the short game are the ones that I'll actively be avoiding. And it's not just the putting. You can look at around the green as well. So a lot of players here that could have gone a little bit lucky, like a Jaeger, right? He chipped in on his last hole. Also, I believe chipped in one other time during his round. So it wasn't just that one shot that got him well into the positive, but a Dumpy Bow, a Harry Hall, an Andrew Novak, a Luke List, all got extremely lucky out there in this category. And, that's why when we looked at Lucas Glover a little bit earlier, I wasn't overly thrilled out there with his stat profile, because outside of this around the green play, like he didn't do much. A Cage Lee, right? He was pretty horrible in all the other categories. Outside of his around the green play, like a Mason Anderson, I wouldn't really count on it happening again. And then Castillo, who this is a shame because he's a flusher. I mean, I've seen him in person, really good off the tee and approach player. Played him this week hoping that we'd get that really good off the tee play and approach play. It was all short game, right? It was about 6 strokes out there in the short game categories. it's just very, very unlikely to happen that way the rest of the week. So that's why these two short game categories are categories I'm actively looking to fade. Whereas if guys lost a bunch of strokes in these two categories, there's a chance they could have a little bit of a bounce back. Now, if they're guys that also lost a bunch of strokes out there with their ball striking today, then they could just be a bad play, right? They could just be somebody that's not hitting the ball well and they can't get the ball in the hole. But like a Blades Brown, now he's +5, so it could be a little bit sketchy here, but he's at least gaining with his irons and then losing a whole bunch with the short game. You go down here, you find Bryce Garnett, who gained off the tee and gained with his irons, but then, was pretty terrible over there in the two short game categories. You can find some players on here that set up a little bit better than the rest. Like a Chandler Phillips would be a great example, right? Gaining off the tee, gaining out there with the approach play. Short game, probably not what we'd be hoping for. Lanto Griffin, same thing, right? The two ball striking categories, over a stroke out there in both of those, also losing over a stroke in the two short game categories. So that's how you can use this to your advantage. You can go to the bottom end of the putting list as well and do the exact same thing. You can look at guys like Neil Shipley for a little bit of a bounce back, maybe a Luke Clanton. You can see that there, right? Lost over 3 strokes putting. He's going to be an AM Wave starter tomorrow, which maybe isn't the best side of the draw, but if you're looking for a bounce back candidate, like I wouldn't roll him out. A Kieran Van Wyck, I believe is how you say his name. I'm sure I'm butchering that just a little bit. Very, very talented young amateur player. This ball striking was unbelievable today over there this morning. So he's on the PM wave, the right side of the tee times that you're looking for. And he lost 3 strokes short game yesterday, or today, I should say. Could very well go out there and bounce back tomorrow. So these are the sort of players that I'd be looking to get over the field on, right? As opposed to the guys that were well out there into the positive. So this is just one data point to go out there and use though, right? Just like the weather, right? It's not the gospel, right? You can't act like just because they, gained a whole bunch of strokes on approach one day that they're 100% going to do it the next day, right? It's just one different way to go out there and evaluate a player. And you've got to put together the whole puzzle. We've got weather is one part of that, right? Maybe a slight lean over there towards your later starters. You've got some of the shots gained metrics that you can go through as well. Over there on the SHIPIT Nation Stone, they've got the round 2 historical that you can go through. You've got a lot of the things like the approach series, putting series over there on the Stone. And I believe last week, I haven't been able to check it out quite yet myself. They added another category or two, I believe, out there to the Stone to give you even more data to go through for these players. So when you add in the weather, your regular shots gained, all that stuff they have over there on the Stone, you can quickly see how there's a whole lot of stuff to go through to pick your player pool for any given round. So make sure to incorporate as much or as little of that as you guys would like into your process. The idea here out here of these live streams and these videos, right, is to give you guys some insight into what I'm doing over there in my process. It doesn't mean that you have to copy everything and implement it yourself, but I'm hopefully giving you guys a little bit of perspective, right, into somebody who's doing this for every single slate, right, what they're thinking through when it's coming to trying to breaking down what they want to do out there with their lineups, and hopefully you find it helpful out there as well. So let me sort this by the leaderboard. Let me get a sip of my Red Bull over here. My mouth is getting dry. We'll catch up on any last player pool questions that you have, and then we're going to go through some lineup construction, a little bit of contest selection as well. So good old Big Dick Vic, as some would call him. I thought he'd have a little bit of a bounce back this week just because it's a weaker field event, and he hasn't played in a regular PGA Tour event like this in literally 2 years. He gained off the tee. He gained on approach today, and then the putter was pretty hot as well. I mean, this is a vintage Victor Hovland stat profile. I mean, he's never going to chip the ball well. He's one of the worst players we have in that category in the world. Actually, that's a stretch, right? We'll say in professional golf. He's towards the lower half of that. But yeah, the rest of the stat profile looked great there. So I can't say anything bad about him. We think Tommy Fleetwood is going to miss the cut as a betting pre-favorite. That'd be pretty wild, Ross, but he's not in terrible position. So we'll have to see. Yeah, you're talking about the putter with Kazire. Yeah, that was funny. The little boomerang. Shank pulling around to JT. We'll have to see. Who knows, Prep? But I guess you mentioned it first. So if he does, we'll remember you down there in chat. Alan says, Nico Echeverria looked damn good today. What you say, Luke? Yeah, man. He is an absolute stud. The only issue I have with him, man, is that he played almost too good, right? Like if you're jumping on now, it feels like you're jumping on just a little bit too late. And he was a little bit putter heavy over there for round 1. So he's not my favorite play out there for round 2 showdown, but if he could go out there and piece together another round or two like this, I'm going to feel pretty good about him out there in my GPP lineup. So we'll see how it shakes out over the next few days, but I hope the ball striking can kind of lead him a little bit more going forward. This velo guy is going to kill your first round leader bet. Damn, what is he about to get to -5 or something? I obviously can't track it here, but I hate to hear that, man. Maybe he'll bogey a hole coming in for you. Can young Tom bounce back in the preferred conditions? Tom Kim is a guess what you're saying there. You're really confusing me with your capitalization there, but let's assume that you mean Tom Kim. So stat-wise, I don't think it was that pretty this morning where he shot like +3 on the easier side. Yeah, sure, he can come through, right? You're never going to say never about a player like Tom Kim. But this stat profile, I mean, he was into the negative tee to green, and then he gained with the putter. Like I said, was ugly, right? Not really what we were hoping to see right there. He's just going to have to turn on the switch, right? Clearly today, he did not have his best stuff. He normally has the exact opposite stat profile. In fact, heading into this event, right, he was losing like over a stroke putting per round. I think it was like 1.4 shots gained putting per round. But tee to green, right, he was gaining like 1.5 shots gained per round. So, kind of bizarre world with what you saw out there for Tom Kim today. But if he turns it around, he plays a little bit more like he usually does. Yeah, for sure, he could make the cut, but no one knows, right? No one has that crystal ball. Got to play Phillips with the mustache alone. The stat profile is fantastic too. I know we were looking at that one a little bit earlier, but these shots gained metrics are just to die for, I would say. I mean, this is exactly what we're hoping to see, right? Short game regression, and then a little bit of ball striking stats mixed in too. Take a look at Victor Perez. Ooh, Victor, he was playing well earlier. I think he was -1 the last time I checked. So ended up -2. What a stud. Love to see that. A little putting heavy, though. So I played him this week. He was one of those sleeper plays that I believe I mentioned on the live stream yesterday. But the putter was his main positive. I mean, he gained over 2 strokes there. Every other category was within a stroke of neutral. He kind of like a Nico, he's got to get the ball striking going, right? Like if he's going to finish top 10 at the end of the week, it's not going to be him gaining 2 strokes putting every single round. So I'm a little concerned about him, but it's okay, right? If he's going to do that for 1 round, then so be it. He's just going to have to be more sustainable the other 3 days. Proven winner, Tommy Fleetwood. Yeah, dude, I can't believe that he's ever been the favorite at a PGA Tour event. That is blasphemous in my opinion. Now, somebody like Straka, I could have seen him being the favorite out there with that wave edge that we had. Not Tommy Fleetwood, though. I thought that was crazy. And you have 2 first-round leaders right now. Yeah, that's right. I saw your DM earlier. I was only able to quickly glance at it, Nick. You're probably swing that velo one, too. So best of luck, you and Hermit Money down there. I hope that he either doesn't birdie that hole that you guys think he's going to birdie, or maybe he bogeys for you. And welcome on in, Joseph. I know you're a little late there to the chat, but better to have you here late than never. So let's go through some of the contests that you have available, which kind of look like we're used to seeing out here in round 2 showdown. They're never going to be the biggest out here for round number 2, and especially when it's a smaller field event like this. So your $100 single entry, rather than it being like a 30K contest, it's 20K. But the thing that's great is instead of just leaving it at 5K to first, which sometimes they do, and it's like a fourth to first dog shit payout structure, is they made it a little bit over, I guess, a sixth the first place. It's like 1.6 or something like that out there for the odds. But either way, it's not terrible out there with this payout structure. So sorry, I completely butchered that. It's 15% out there to first place, which is a lot better than that 25 or 30% that you see a lot of times, right? When it's half of that going over there to first place. I mean, ideally, we'd want 2,000 to first, right? Because that'd be 10% out there for the winner, but 15% is like the next best thing that you're really going to find. So maybe not the biggest contest, but the payout structures on these look pretty decent. The big 555 is always a little bit top heavy, but even this one is a little bit under a fourth over there to first place, which is better than it normally is with the payout structure. Let's take a look at the $5. Yeah, this one's a fifth over there to first place. It's maybe not the best, but it's a little better than what we usually have out here with these contests. So it's not like you're going to win a milli maker or anything like that, right? You're not going to have anything close to that over here for this sort of slate. But these contests aren't terrible. Like this is a $44 6 entry that you can go out there and enter. It's a little top heavy out there with the payout, but it's a nice little GPP that you go out there and max enter for a little bit over $250. Let's see if they have the $10.18 max. Let's see. So that's the single entry. So that one's not going to be it. I don't think they have that contest posted. They usually only post that one when it's a little bit of a bigger slate, but maybe for rounds 3 and 4, we can get that one posted as well. But personally, for me, it's looking like the kind of slate where I'll enter like 40, maybe 50 lineups over here in the $5 GPP. I'll enter this $100 single entry almost for sure. Then anything on top of that, I'm going to have to figure out. Like if it's a slate that I want to up my exposure on, like I see an edge over there with my exposures, like I could see myself entering an entry or two in that 5-5-5. But if not, if I'm going to add anything on top of, this, $5 lineups, there's 50, 40, 50 lineups over there, that $100 single entry, it's probably like the $33 single entry, like the $100 single entry, maybe like the $12 that you have out there as well. Just some of these smaller, flatter payout structure contests that we have. So like this would be an example of one of those, like it's a flat 10% to first place single entry, not high stakes or anything over there, but $12, but just a good contest out there for your bankroll. Like this one's a little bit over 10% over there to first place. But look at this, second place is 10% of the pot. Like that's a really good payout structure for second and third place. Like third's, $400 over here in this sort of single entry. These are the kind of contests that I'll actively be trying to enter. So, yeah, maybe not the biggest slate that we've ever seen over here for Showdown, but it's playable. Like they still have that 4-entry $250, by the way. It's just a little bit smaller than normal. Now, I'm not going to play in this one just because it is a third over there to first place, but yeah, it's decent, I would say, out there with our choices. In terms of like what you're actually thinking about when building lineups for tomorrow, it mostly comes down to the ownership for me. Like this is a weather slate where, like I said, my player pool is probably going to shade towards those PM wave players, but it's not going to be an all-in edge by any means. So, if I have some of those AM guys sneaking into a few lineups, like maybe it's a 4-2, like I did for some of my main slate lineups, then it's not anything that I'm going to be like trying to get away from. So for example, towards the top end of the board, I'm more so trying to take guys that I know aren't going to be mega chalky. So for example, like I still think Justin Thomas is going to get some ownership. If you're trying to find a pivot up here towards the top end of the board, like I know Tom Kim was somebody was mentioning before, like it'd be like maybe a Tom Kim that you can get a little bit different with. I'd say Jordan Spieth here at +3. Like if you use him, you're going to be a little bit different compared to some other players. Let me actually refresh this so that we have all the latest scoring loaded in here. Those would be the kind of guys that you could force it with, like maybe an Alex Smalley, maybe a Luke Clanton down there at +3. The rest of the board here, though, is going to be pretty spread out with the ownership. Like I'd expect guys like a Fleetwood to be like 20, maybe like 22%. Xander Schauffele is probably going to be a little bit chalkier than he was for main slate. I could see Xander being like 25%. Sepp Straka's still going to carry some ownership, right? He'll probably be 25% himself. Like, you can't hide from the ownership towards the top end of the board here. Like pretty much no matter who you go out there and play, you're going to be getting at least 12 to 15% ownership. And, that 12 to 15% are your guys like Tom Kim, maybe like 10% out there on somebody like a Jordan Spieth. Everyone else is going to be somebody you'd probably consider chalk out there in this portion of the board. So I'm going to go out there and mix in, let's throw in a JT to start who is an AM wave player, but like I said, it's not the end of the world if you have a few of those guys mixing into lineups. Our second man in, I'm going to throw in a Will Zalatoris as well, who I believe is an AM wave player, but let me double check on that one real quick. Let's see, good old, yeah. So he's actually one of the first few groups out. So that's already 2 AM guys that we have in this sort of lineup. It's not like I'm going to be hyper fixated out there on that side, but I don't want to have a lineup of like all 6 guys going out early, right? Like you don't want to push it that far, I'd say, over there with your lineup construction. Our next man in, I'm going to throw in an Adam Scott, who I know goes out later, who's also going to be a little bit lower owned. And I mean, that's already 3 pivots right there, right? Like if the rest of our lineup was pretty chalky to go out there and round this out, like you'd be totally fine. So like, for example, even if you use Højgaard, who is maybe carrying a little bit more ownership out there towards that PM wave. If you also threw in, let's say, I'm trying to find somebody that's a little bit chalkier, just to show you that you can probably get away with it if you wanted to with playing some higher owned guys. Not a lot of chalk at this portion of the board, actually, at least for guys that are playing on the PM wave side. So I think an Andrew Putnam is also PM wave, is also probably going to carry a little bit of ownership. But like, even if you had a Højgaard and a Putnam in here, who for the 7K range might be close to like 7% owned, which is a little bit higher owned than some of the other guys around him. If you start with pivots up here towards the top end of the board, then I'm not as worried out there from the ownership perspective, right? It's not who you play, it's how you play them, right? It's not the individual players that you're throwing into your lineups in your player pool. It's who you're using them out with in actual lineups. So, if you're throwing in these sort of players, as long as you have these kind of pivots towards the top, you're just fine. And it doesn't have to be like you have 3 mega pivots out there up top. It could be like you have Adam Scott in here, right? He's there at T97. And then your other pivot here might even be a Sam Burns, who's still within the current cut line, right? It's not even like he's playing terribly, but he's a little bit lower owned than some of the other guys around him. So it's all about that lineup construction that you're going with. If you want to take a little bit more chalk towards the top end of the board, so let's say you want to play a Straka, maybe you want to go with a slightly higher owned option in, let me even think who would be, like maybe a Xander Schauffele Straka would be one of the chalkier starts that you would go with. Like maybe that's where you shy away from some of the 7K range chalk. So maybe rather than going with a Højgaard, you go with his brother, right? Like Rasmus, who also has that late tee time. But because he's +5 and tied for 132nd, right, he's not going to be nearly as popular as his brother, right? Maybe then rather than going with an Andrew Putnam here, he's a little bit chalkier. That's where you take a shot on, maybe not Adam Schenk because he's +9. Like he'd be an Ori Could, I guess, over there for tomorrow. But like a Danny Walker, right, who didn't have the best day today, but is on the right side of tee times, like maybe you throw him in there, right, out there in this kind of lineup. So, based on who you're using up top, based on where you're getting that leverage, it gives you an opportunity. It gives you a little bit of a longer leash to go out there and play some ownership in a few other spots. So that's what I'm thinking about when it's going through my lineup construction. A lot of this is done for me when I go out there and build on an optimizer. This is more so the thought process when I'm building by hand, because on an optimizer, I'm setting a product ownership cap, right? That's how I'm going out there and making sure that I have enough differentiation. But that's really my main concern out there for round 2 and 3 showdown. It's not round 4 showdown where we have the placement points, right? It's not even like main slate where you have a massive weather edge to lean into. Now, if this was going to be like a stroke and a half difference, maybe I would say I only want guys, right, starting on the PM side of it, but it's not that kind of slate, at least based on the forecast that we currently have. So that's how I'm handling all my round 2 showdown exposure. I'll see if there's any last second questions down there in chat, but if not, that's all I've got over here for tomorrow. So go ahead, smash that like button for the SHIPIT Nation crew if you guys haven't already, and subscribe so you guys don't miss the content for rounds 3 and 4, because of course, we're doing the same kind of live streams out there for the weekend. So where did we leave off? So it looks like Velo did make that bogey. So there you go. Yeah, the contests aren't terrible, that's for sure. And yeah, let's look at the $20 lottery. I actually didn't see that one before. I thought it was the 25 that they had posted. But you're right. It's a $20 lottery, which is a little different than what they do on here for every single slate. And it's only a fifth over there to first place. So it's pretty much the same payout structure as what we have for that $5 GPP. And it's not ideal, but it's not terrible, just like Nick said there. Let's see. The Velo double. Oh, it's not even a bogey. It's a double. Make it a double, as I say with my GIFs. Yeah, look at that. Velocity double. You guys are making up new nicknames for him. I absolutely love it. So Jaeger and Bridgman, are those guys that you're looking at out there in the PM wave that you're saying? Or no, those are the first round leader bets that you hit on. Good stuff, my man. And then we got Phil down there, says, don't clown you too bad. Make you feel better about your Kitayama. I don't have anything nice to say about that, Phil, and I'm not going to clown you for it other than saying RIP your 30% of lineups, and that's why you don't play 30% of a guy that's single digit owned, right? Like he was 6-7% owned out there in GPPs. Going 5x leverage on a player, I mean, you know what you got yourself into, right? Like if a guy like that misses the cut that you didn't have to play in 30% of your lineups, then the only person to blame is yourself. So, it's a little bit of tough love, I guess. I mean, I've done that before, right? If you have a hot take on a guy, I would go with the hot take. I have that happen, full transparency. Like I'll have value plays like Davis Riley this week. I played in 20% of lineups. If he missed the cut, I had like 5x leverage to the field. It would have sucked, right? That happens sometimes. So don't beat yourself up about it. It's going to happen sometimes, but just know you don't have to go crazy on players like that, right? That's what I try to remind myself of. When I get those things wrong, sometimes I go, you know what? Like maybe I should just go with the 2.5x, 3x leverage if I like the guy instead of like 4 or 5x leverage. So maybe just incorporate that going a little bit forward. And then Michael Kim, round 2 or bust. I think he's in a good spot, man, right? PM Wave is probably the side that you'd want him to be on. And let's look at the stats, actually. I'm not actually quite sure how he played today, but there's a real easy way to figure it out here. He gained off the tee, and he was an exact 0 over there with his approach play. This is a pretty good stat profile, right? Ball striking was decent, especially off the tee. And then the short game categories, he was into the negative with both of them. So I'm there with you, man. I hope he makes the cut. He's 1 shot off of that right now, and could make for a pretty good play as well. And then you have Shank in your single entry. Exactly, right? So let me look at my player pool for full transparency, Phil, because I played Kitayama, so I could say that that one's terrible. So I was there with you, right? But let me find somebody that I was way over the field on, Phil, that it looked like a donkey dick, because I want to make you feel better about it, because trust me, it happens to everyone, right? Like, this isn't like a one-off thing. Everyone in the chat that played a 150 max, or even if you like played a 20 max this week, I'm sure you have a donkey dick in your player pool as well. So let me find the one that we can make fun of. So I played a lot of Michael Kim, but he's +2. So I don't know if we want to dance on his grave quite yet, right? I played 20% Kitayama, so I don't know if I can really talk, actually, based on what you said, Phil, because I only have 10% less than you of the guy that we're actually speaking on. But let me find a better example, right? We can find another donkey dick that I can call my donkey dick. I actually don't really have a great example other than Kurt Kitayama. Dude, it looks like we both made the same mistake this week. Crazy how that works out, huh? And then, you said in Vegas? Yeah, I didn't have a whole bunch of Vegas, but damn, that stinks, man. And that's your single entry? Dude, I was going to say the start of that doesn't look too bad. Straka, Wallace, Jaeger, all pretty good rounds. But then, yeah, those last 2, man, that's PGA DFS for you. Alrighty, that's all I've got over here for the round 2 stream. Go ahead, smash all of your exposure out there for tomorrow, whether it's the large field GPPs, cash, whatever you guys are going out there and entering. I want to see all of you towards the top end of this contest. Make sure to check out the content out there for rounds 3 and 4 as well. And for all the prop and betting content over here for round 2, I'll be doing that over there on my YouTube channel. That is, of course, LukeDFS over there on YouTube. It'll be live at 8:30 p.m. local time. Eastern, by the way, is the time, the time zone that I'm in over here on the East Coast. We'll be doing a full deep dive of some of the pin locations, be going through the underdog and prize picks boards, that sort of fun stuff. So if that's your sort of thing, like you bet matchups, you bet 3 balls, all of that over there for golf, make sure to check out that live stream as well. But that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate all your support over here on the Ship It Nation channel, and I'll see you guys a little bit later on this evening.